Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column Live. It's the 6th of November and it's just gone noon. Myself and Brian Gerrish are here in Plymouth as always. Morning, Brian.
Afternoon.
Afternoon.
So I had to catch you on that one.
What's the weather doing, Brian?
Well, the weather outside is very, very nice in Plymouth. Blue skies, a little bit chilly, frost this morning, so probably we can expect the same tomorrow. We've had a few emails from people saying, what is it about the weather on UK Column Live? And I'm going to say very gently, it's just a bit of fun. So we're looking out the window to get our weather forecast. Try it, it works really well. Indeed it does.
Brian, you're starting the show.
Well, we've decided to start off with an article on an MP called Doris. This is the Mail article. This lady, who of course represents us and the country, is going to abandon being an MP for a bit, and she's going to go off into the jungle as a celebrity. So the Mail's made quite a bit of a story of this. Some of the Tories have said they could be, some of the Tories fear she could be in breach of the MP's code of conduct. I wonder whether that's possibly that she's not involved with paedophilia, which seems to be a problem for the Tory party at the moment. This is a picture of the lady, but the reason we're focusing on her a little bit more, if we can just get that picture up on screen. The reason that we're focusing on this is because many people may feel that this is just a sort of stuff and nonsense story, but we actually believe that there's something deeper going on here, in that the press and the media are helping to actually merge MPs in with effectively pop stars. So there's an air of confusion at the moment. Are we actually witnessing people who are upstanding, professional, representing their country properly, or are we actually now being ruled by pop stars and film stars, media people in Westminster? Is this just a nothing, or is this actually the start of something deeper? We think it's actually manipulation of people's minds to actually take away the image that we've got politicians, you know, who are professional people.
We've got posed the question as well as how much is she getting paid to go on there as well?
Quite a lot of money, I think. Yeah. But, you know, is she an MP or is she some sort of media star? Well, clearly she's somewhere in between at the moment.
Just make her mind up.
Yeah. But this is the key story which you picked up on
today,
to do with journalism.
Journalism, yeah, it was in the Sun today. Apparently the National Union of Journalists have claimed the newspapers should be underpinned by law. This lady here is the boss. Her name is Michelle Stanistreet. And she's saying that journalists need to be sort of reined in and governed. But 66% of journalists in a poll apparently disagree. And already China, Iran, Russia and Zimbabwe have state-controlled media, and yeah, we're just thinking, is that the way this country is going to be going?
Absolutely. We can just call those comments up on screen because I think they're quite important here. So we've got some amazing things happening in Britain at the moment. Of course, the media and the newspapers under attack for phone hacking. But of course, for many years, we've had the press continually focusing on niff-naff and trivia, celebrity lifestyles with a bit of muckraking. And now all of a sudden what I think the press are beginning to wake up to is the fact that that this government, and of course Labour government was doing it as well, are moving rapidly towards state control of the press. And of course we've got in the background Mr. Leveson. But here, these words really set it out, don't they? Many feared a chilling effect on free speech, and China, Iran, Russia, and Robert Mugabe's Zimbabwe have been flagged up as having state-controlled media. People are saying that freedom of expression is in a very dangerous position. And of course, the union, are they being naive? Or is it political blindness? I don't think so. I think what we're seeing is that the National Union of Journalists has simply been pulled into the state media control along with all the, or state control along with all the other unions. But this is really a key point at the moment for freedom in UK, because we know we've got major problems with the It's not just the behaviour, the standards and morality of our politicians. We've now got accusations of paedophilia being brought right into Westminster, and yet we've got these same people in Westminster who are suggesting that they're the right people to control what does and does not appear in the press, which is
absolutely
quite extraordinary. It probably ties in with this gentleman here. I think this is a fine picture which mirrors the Cabbage Patch column on the back of the UK column. We believe Mr Cameron does look like a Cabbage Patch doll, and we're going to stick with that. So a bit of humour where it's needed. But of course the Mirror pointing out here that in the Leveson inquiry, David Cameron hasn't handed over any texts or emails. So Cameron, of course, has been absolutely laying into the mainstream media and the press over phone hacking. He sets up an inquiry with one of his old chums, Mr Leveson, and then what does he do? Well, because he's the Prime Minister and a member of an elite school, he doesn't need to give his
apparently
pass his emails
he
over.
didn't interpret, it's the way it was interpreted, the ones that he was asking for, he interpreted it wrongly. Inappropriate conversations. So he wasn't going to pass those inappropriate conversations on because he didn't think they were relevant.
But he wasn't able to interpret it properly.
No, this not, the question, not the request when he was asked to send them. That was in the Independent.
So we wonder what else the Prime Minister may not be able to interpret. Perhaps he's not able to interpret the seriousness of the accusations against the paedophile rings coming into Parliament.
Talking of which, back in June, have we got this story up? Yeah, Theresa May, back in June, we did a report on it, brought in snooping laws, and she said these laws would stop paedophile rings.
Just bring that up on the screen here.
She pushed ahead with plans to force internet and phone providers to store details of customer calls, emails and website visits. She suggested the laws would only be used to access crucial bits of information. And under the laws, only the police, security agent and tax officials would have access to the information in an attempt to allay fears into people's privacy. Now, my question is, she's brought in these laws and she's saying to stop the paedophile rings. They are not allowing people to report and give these names. The police aren't doing their job as to go and collect the people that have been named, the politicians. So it's a bit of a contradiction, especially now. And then we've got the Cameron article that he's not handing over. He's not handing over his emails. We're not getting the names aren't coming out of the people and the politicians being named. But she was the one pushing for these. Well,
the thing which I think we can focus on here is that the UK column has consistently flagged up that Theresa May is a very dangerous woman in politics. And what she's been doing in the background is basically building up a phenomenal system. So I've got here one of the UK column articles when we had an in-depth look into Theresa May and the network that she was building up. And you're absolutely right, there's something wrong here because this woman has been sitting quietly in the background, bringing together a whole range of organisations, which we'll just have a little bit of a more detailed look at that in a moment.
Pushing your whole Orwellian state she has been, but when it comes to the own government office.
Well, when it's what she's been setting up is a spying ring to spy on ordinary people. But of course, when the spying is starting to produce information suggesting that paedophiles are not people at the bottom of the scale, they're actually wealthy people, include wealthy people at the top of the scale, all of a sudden there's a complete shutdown on this information with media blackouts, de-notices and everything else. And of course, the other thing that Theresa May has been doing is playing around with the Fixated Threat Assessment Centre, which is a unit combining the police and psychiatrists who can turn up on your doorstep to section you. So in the background now for many years, we've seen that the government in this country is bringing in more and more systems and technology to spy on people. What are they doing with that information? Well, they're not breaking apart criminal activity. So obviously it's intended for something else. This is a diagram from the UK column where we we thought the best way to try and show what this woman was up to was by listing some of the organisations that she's involved with. One of the worst organisations is MAPA, the Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangement, as this draws in a whole range of organisations in any locality. So it includes local authorities, it includes the local NHS trust, it includes education, police. So all of these bodies are put in a loose arrangement where they meet behind closed doors and they actually discuss individuals and whether that individual represents a threat to society. So this is a very detailed, very complex network that's been built up.
Common purpose as well in there, I see.
Common purpose are absolutely in there, because common purpose people have been used to lead key positions. But of course, the Association of Chief Police Officers is central to this as well. And also, it goes deeper into our national security organisations like MI5 and MI6. Yeah. So at the moment, we've pointed out that the East German Stasi would have been delighted to have had a system with the capability of the one that Theresa May has been bringing up. But we're going to emphasise this point. She's got this huge network which is supposedly there to help protect people, but of course it doesn't want to pick up on reports of paedophiles. And we've got other members of the Tory cabinet. Ken Clarke, MP, of course, is one who in recent days has been trying to squash alternative media reporting what they know about the abuse of young people. I'm just going to really push this one home. This is all part of the same article, so people who'd like to read this will be able to shortly read it on the website, but you can also get a copy from us. We pointed out this business that basically Theresa May's setup has now included the sectioning of people. So if you dare to stand up and report what the government is doing and trying to do, then you can very well get a knock on your door. And of course, this is exactly what's happened recently to this lady, Holly Barker. We mentioned her yesterday. We're going to keep mentioning this lady. She's been sectioned and she's being held in Warnford Hospital, Oxford. And what has she done? She attempted to defend her child from abuse. And that has resulted in her being picked up through collusion between Oxfordshire Child Services, Social Services, and teams in Wales. And this just gives you an indication of how people can be tracked across the country. We'll just end on this particular subject by another article from the UK column, where we were reminding people that the Sunday Times accurately reported in January 1998 that the security service MI5 was announcing an end to spying on activists, radicals and insurgents, and they were going to destroy tens of thousands of files. In fact, it was about 250,000 files that were destroyed. And of course, what was the information within those files? It was information on people within the political arena who had actually been involved with communist organisations or had been involved with radical activity whilst they were at university. And of course, Jack Straw was one of the senior politicians at the time who not only had a record as a radical, but of course he was presumably very keen to get rid of any records held on him. So if we stand back from what's happening in the country, we can see that we've had this shock of the phone hacking, which has produced this massive attack on the mainstream media. We've got Cameron's chum, Mr. Leveson, in the background, working with common purpose guru David Bell to push control of the monitoring of the media and press through to the Media Standards Trust. And then at the same time, we've got this spying organisation set up, which is, of course, not going to bring paedophiles in the Tory party to book. It's going to be helping to suppress people standing up to be counted. I've spoken quite a lot on this, but really we need to get this subject across to people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Where are we going?
Well, we're going to go to your friend.
Yes, Mr. Blair. This was in the Sun this morning. Iraq is booming again thanks to the heroism of British troops, according to Tony Blair. In a rare speech, the ex-Prime Minister highlighted its 9% annual growth rate. He's urged UK firms to invest in Iraq and told London Business Conference the political and human impact of the Saddam regime is known but often overlooked. Less well known is the economic impact. Well, how about the 162,333 deaths that you caused, Mr. Blair? That's all I have to say on it.
Well, I know you feel very strongly. This is a very interesting photograph of Mr. Blair. Sorry, Mike, can we just keep that one up a second? A couple of days after Mr. Blair was elected as Prime Minister, I spoke to a local farmer, a very elderly gentleman at the time. I just bring this across for viewers and listeners today. And I said, what do you think of the new Prime Minister? And the man looked at me very seriously and he said, he's evil. Absolutely. And I said, that's a very interesting statement. What makes you say that? And he said, you've only got to look at his eyes. Yeah. And I think the Sun has captured something there for us. I just don't
understand how he's just not been made accountable for the 162,333 deaths. And those figures came from a Guardian article.
Well, we've got another picture. I think it's
probably more than that. But
we've got another picture here, which we've taken from News Talk. We're encouraging people to look at as much media as possible to see exactly what is going on. But they produced a fine picture of Tony Blair's improvements in Iraq. If we just blow that up full screen, of course, this is the reality of what's been going on now for years as a result of Mr. Blair's handiwork. So probably it's only time before this man is brought in front of a court.
To The Hague he goes, let's hope.
Where do we move to now?
Where are we going then?
It's an elite story of boardroom pay.
Yeah, while everybody is suffering and people are getting part-time jobs because they can't find full-time jobs, industry expert Incomes Data Services have found the average director of Britain's top 100 companies saw their earnings jump up by 27% in the last year. The average long-term incentive plan was worth $938,000 this year, thanks to rising share prices. So, us people out there that can only find part-time jobs, we're all struggling, but these guys are still lining their pockets.
And the Miliband brothers.
And the Miliband brothers are supporting it. And they've just brought, the Miliband brothers just brought in the new living wage of £7.45, I believe, that they're wanting to bring in.
So we have two millionaire brothers who are busy getting excited because ordinary people can just about live. It's a just about living wage is probably the correct term of that £7.45. But I think if we again look a little bit deeper here, what we're actually seeing is this constant push in the country to create this elitist system. We're not to have a middle class, effectively, of people that are going to be comfortable and they're going to be working and the quality of the jobs is there. We are going to have people at the bottom of the pile who are going to be on a minimum wage, and that is just about a survival wage. And at the other end of the scale, we're going to have very wealthy politicians and, of course, anybody connected with the global corporations.
And that's a huge jump, 27% in a year, to have these pay rises going into these bosses' hands. It's huge.
It's deliberate, I think.
Absolutely. Right. Revenue and Customs now. I've discussed this loads of times about Starbucks, Google and Facebook not paying enough tax to this government. Well, it looks like the lady, Lin Homer, she's actually now being criticised for not following up on this and not making these firms a bit more accountable. Apparently, a committee has blasted Mrs. Homer for pursuing small businesses rather than large companies. And again, it's really similar to what we've just been saying with the big bosses. Small little businesses are getting chased after for their taxes. And these large corporations, Facebook, Starbucks, Google, Amazon,
are being assisted to avoid tax.
And their offices are out of the country in other countries such as Ireland,
yeah.
and they're paying minuscule amounts of tax.
Yeah, but this of course makes sense if you say that what the government is actually working on is to create this two-tier system. So you're going to try and crush anybody, particularly self-employed people. They don't like self-employed people because essentially they've got an element of freedom. So what we're going to do is we're going to crush the small people, and we're going to make sure that, as you say, the global corporations are okay. But this lady is very, very interested. We've talked about her before. Yeah. The BBC, the Telegraph here, of course, picked up that the border agency had been led through a string of scandals with this lady, Lin Homer, at the head. And some MPs were talking about rewarding failure, because each time she has done something which has caused a problem. Initially in Birmingham there was a vote rigging problem, then she's promoted, she goes to the border agency, and then she's promoted again. So basically you say on one hand this is ridiculous or madness, but of course if your objective is to actually destroy the infrastructure of this country, destroy public trust in the civil service, you're going to use people like Lin Homer as a placeman, woman in her case, in order to do the damage. Well,
apparently there's uncollected revenue of 32.2 billion, and Margaret Hodge, Labour MP, has said there has been practically no progress since 2004, when the same gap was just over 33 billion in uncollected revenue. Yeah. So she really hasn't made much of an impact.
No, but she is a common purpose leader. So what we've got here is another example of particular people being put in positions where they do damage, and after they've done the damage they're then moved on to somewhere else where they repeat the performance. And common sense tells us that this of course is not right, but the thing is to look deeper. The deliberate objective is to collapse the infrastructure in the country. We will watch her a little bit more closely, I think. Badgers, you wanted to talk about.
I just wanted to say, I brought up my disgust in the government wanted to murder all these badgers. Well, David Attenborough's come out and said leave the badgers alone, but then in the same sentence starts talking about eugenics and saying the real problem is the human population. The global population is predicted to increase from 7 billion to 9 billion by 2050. And Attenborough fears the world's resources will not be sufficient to sustain the increase. And he says you have a very distinguished scientist working with an expert panel to sort these badgers, the badger issue out. The committee headed by Lord Krebs have done that, and they say killing the badgers or murdering the badgers will not make the situation better, except in the very short term. And Mr. Attenborough agrees with that, but then he says on global resources, a population explosion will have devastating effects on Homo sapiens' ability to feed itself. The size of the population will diminish, and the species will not be as self-indulgent as it is at the moment. Well, I agree with him in the badgers, but I disagree with him with the whole eugenics thing.
But it's incredible. He can be this outspoken, jumping from the badgers to world population, but he is not commenting on Iraq and hundreds and thousands of deaths in the various war zones that we've helped create around the world. It's an amazing contrast. This is the underlying agenda, of course, which you've mentioned, which is the UN in particular is constantly pushing for people to become concerned about the world population. This was a Guardian article. Of course, it's supported by Bill and Melinda Gates at the top. And we've brought in this connection before, but the little caption on the lady walking past the 7 billion is a woman walking past a sign in front of the UN headquarters in New York. And of course we know that if we follow through Agenda 21 policy, optimum population control, that where we're heading is the UN encouraging basically the world population to be cut back. And how is it going to be cut back? By every means available, from vaccinations to disease, starvation. So the
tomatoes.
And tomatoes,
soon.
Food. Okay.
Yes.
Well, we'll just push on that for people to have a look at what the UN actually is talking about. And if you think that Agenda 21 is something that just affects your local area and it's about green spaces and taking care of the world, what you will discover, it's something a little bit more sinister than that. Tomatoes.
Tomatoes. Yeah, this caught my eye because we discussed the rats recently, which we will have a picture of in a moment. But apparently there's a GMO tomato that can help reduce heart disease. Tomatoes found to act like good cholesterol and decrease plaque building up in mice. Now, the reason I'm discussing this is because there's been tests done recently on rats when they've been fed GMO food. Oh, you've taken the picture away, have you?
No, we've got the picture.
And it reveals horrifying tumours, infertility in the rats, and tumours and early death. So here we have the Daily Mail promoting this GMO tomato that everyone should go out to help them reduce heart disease. But if you want to reduce your heart disease by getting tumours, then it's all very well and good. And I think we have a picture now.
We're going to say you may choose to look away from the screen. We decided that we would put this picture up, which is very disturbing, not only from the fact that the rats have the tumours, but the fact that obviously there are people involved in testing on animals in this way. And
these are rats who were fed GMO corn. And they were actually, and also tomatoes. It says here, the fresh array of GM foods, as French study claims, rats fed the controversial crops suffer tumours. And this is also from tomatoes as well as the corn. So, Daily Mail, maybe you should try just having a look at the other side of this.
Okay. So sickness is a subject, and sickness benefits is something which could affect us all at some stage. But we're now starting to see basically an attack on this as another area where the state is not happy if we're getting too much protection. Mm-hmm. So what did you discover in this article? Well, what we find is it's costing the government £25 million
to bring on this trial, and in various areas of the country. And basically, if you don't get treatment, you're going to lose your sickness benefits. So does that mean that people who don't want to have their vaccinations possibly each year and who are off sick, and if they don't get their vaccinations, they're going to have their benefits slashed? Yeah. And Chancellor George Osborne is seeking ways to slash another $10 billion from the welfare budget by 2016. On top of the $18 billion of cuts that have already been announced.
If we just read out the actual text on this, it said that sickness benefit will be stripped from claimants who refuse to get treatment for their problems under a crackdown to be tested in a 25 million government trial. Ministers want to extend the concept of conditionality used to force the jobless to seek work used to force the jobless to seek work to welfare payments for those with health complaints as well. Yeah. So all of the terminology is there that we're going to force you to accept this. And this, of course, follows on with a theme which we came into, that what we've got being established at the moment is an elitist society. If you're at the top of the pile, you're an MP or an approved media star, you are going to be worth millions, as of course Mr. Osborne is. But if you're an ordinary person, you are going to be working full-time on barely living wage, thanks to Mr. Miliband, and you're going to do as you're told, or you're not going to get. And apparently a statement from number 10 has said this is a tough love approach towards our aim of ending the something for nothing culture in benefits. It's right that we provide support for people in need, but we should also expect something back in return. And that's from Mr. Cameron, of course. That's from Mr. Cameron's office, number 10, yes. Also a millionaire and an MP that's been enjoying his expenses. Yes, well, selling arms over in Iran, I do believe, or in Saudi Arabia at the moment. Selling arms. So we'll end on the fact that there are elections in America. Yeah. We understand. Is there? And one of the things that's has emerged is the amount of money that's been spent, and I think you've got some figures for us which are in the billions instead of the millions of dollars. The most expensive, this is off actually the BBC
Radio 1 Newsbeat. I couldn't believe it when I was listening to it on the way in this morning. Yeah, it's the most expensive election in American history, costing $6 billion. That's 3.71 billion, whereas we know America is in a very hard state at the moment. And they've found the money, though. They found the money to back Romney and Obama. Romney, just a few figures here, is worth an estimate of $190 to $250 million. We haven't got how much Obama's worth.
Right. Would you like to make any predictions, Mike? No mic.
No
Mike
mic.
has no mic and he's not making predictions.
But if you could make a prediction, Obama.
Okay, so the prediction coming out of the UK column technical room this afternoon is Obama, and we'll wait and see what happens. So we're going to say thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Keep looking at the politics, keep analysing what's happening, but if we want to do something about it, it's up to us. Tell a friend, speak out, say no.
And subscribe to the ukcolumn.org.
Okay, thanks for joining us.